Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a vintage port, but it's not a declared vintage port, it's what's called a Single Quinta Vintage Port. So this is Taylor's Quinta de Vargellas, and it's the 2015 vintage of that. So in good years, Taylor's would declare a vintage port. In the case of Taylor's, that would be a blend, generally predominantly Quinta de Vargellas, but also including wines from their other principal Quinta de Terrafeta, and more recently they've started to include wines also from another Quinta that they've acquired in the Cima Corgo, somewhere called Quinta de Junco. So the idea is that in a year that's not good enough to produce a declared vintage port, the wines from the top estates, such as Vargellas and in some cases Terrafeta, can be released as single vineyard releases. They may not have the longevity of the company's top declared vintage port, but they can still be very characterful, very enjoyable wines. And Vargellas is recognised as one of the leading estates in the Douro. From the Douro Superior sub-region, it was acquired by Taylor's in 1893. They in fact acquired 3 estates and combined them, so they didn't finish the purchase until 1896. And more recently, in fact, they've bought a neighbouring property and added another 46 hectares to the 67 that they'd originally had. Evidently Vargellas saw vines planted there first in 1820, so it had been producing port for over 70 years before Taylor's purchased the company. Now Taylor's have a very long history. They trace their origins back to 1692 when Job Beersley, an Englishman, came to Oporto and started exporting red wine back to England. In 1744, the Taylor's became the first English company to own vineyards in the Douro Valley itself. The company changed hands several times in the 19th century. At one stage it was purchased by the Taylor family, where it acquired the name. Subsequently it was bought by the Fladgate family, and then in the early 20th century the Yeatman family, who still own it, purchased the company. Hence the company's full name is normally seen as Taylor, Fladgate and Yeatman. Just to be completely clear, this is a single Quinta bottling of Quinta de Vargellas. They do also make an icon wine, their vineyards, which is produced from a small plot of old vines specifically on the property, and in fact in terms of rarity and in terms of price it exceeds that of their declared vintage ports. 2015 was actually a really lovely vintage in terms of there wasn't a lot of rain. There was a very dry winter, and it was only a period of rain in October and November that gave sufficient moisture for the plants to grow throughout the season. A dry start to the spring gave low yields. The vines didn't set a lot of fruit. As a result, it was largely a disease-free year. In the early summer, there were some hot temperatures, and 40 degrees was exceeded at Quinta de Vargellas a couple of times in June and July. After this, the summer remained warm and dry, but there weren't the heat spikes throughout the rest of the season. And the result was really healthy fruit, perfectly formed bunches, disease-free fruit, and very little raisoning amongst the grapes. Harvest started on the 7th of September, a little early, and was finished by the 16th. There was a little rain on the 15th and 16th of September, but that didn't affect the quality of the fruit significantly. The weather also played a part in the winemaking, in that the cool nights helped to give long ferments, which aided the extraction. Winemaking at Quinta de Vargellas is done entirely traditionally in shallow lagars, so foot treading the wine for the short period of maceration that goes on prior to draining and fortification. The blends on ports are rarely clear, but the planting here is predominantly the 5 major port varieties. So planting is about 25% Touriga Nacional, 25% Touriga Franquesa, 22% Tinta Rorez, with Tinta Barroca, Tinta Cow present as well. Also, amongst the old vine plots, they have a wide variety of traditional port grapes. So varieties such as Tinta Barca, Tinta Francesa, Tinta Amarola, Grand Noir, Susau, Tinta Barada, and a variety called Cornifesto. And I'm sure there are more varieties going into this, many of them in old interplanted blocks, because the vineyards here are very old. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Start by saying the colour is deep and dark. That is certainly opaque. There's a slight purple note to its inky red colour, swelling it Unsurprisingly, the wine will have high sugar and has 20% alcohol, so it's clinging to the glass and it's forming tears or legs on the side of the glass very readily. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are a combination, and they're actually quite well melded, of ripe fruits and the spirity note, and the spirits are coming through as sort of almost with a spicy note, a high-toned note to them. So the ripeness is a sort of a rich, dark prune plum, dark cherry sort of note. You know, there's a juicy red-black fruit there, and over this sort of spiritiness, giving sort of spicy notes. There's quite attractive warmth to the aromas, it seems. So let's taste. On the palate, the wine is rich and warm. It's sweet. There's a sort of a deep, rich licorice note coming behind those sort of black fruits. There's a dark plum, a black cherry note. The structure is fine and smooth. There's not a huge amount of sort of gripping tannin, but there's a rounded richness to the structure. So the alcohol rounding out the wine and the rich fruit combine beautifully there. The spiritiness that stands out on the nose doesn't particularly stand out on the palate. That's sort of beautifully rounded, and as I say, goes through this spectrum of dark fruits and ends up in a sort of a licoricey core, and then comes out at the other side of the licoriciness with more sort of sweetness, and that's where the juicy black cherry and perhaps a tiny touch of sort of ripe raisin notes are coming through. The wine has good length. There's a nice balance and harmony to the way the fruit and the alcohol are working together. The sweetness and the acidity, they all seem to be in very nice harmony together. I think this is a wine that's starting to drink quite nicely. I mean, 2015, it's had a little bit of time in bottle to settle, and as I say, that spiritiness that you're seeing on the nose is not as apparent on the palate, but I would see no trouble in giving this another 10 years aging to carry on smoothing, but there's no need to give it that extended long age. Over the next few years, this will provide some really lovely drinking. I think this is showing that Vargellas is one of the best of the Single Quinta. I mean, Taylor's are very good port producers, and this is a really enjoyable glass of wine. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you found the tasting interesting. If you've enjoyed it, do please press like in the box below. Do feel free to share the tasting with your friends if you think that they're interested. Do also consider signing up and following us on YouTube. It would be great to have your support with that. We would also be really interested to hear your feedback, so do leave some comments in the comments section as well. But most importantly, I do hope you make some time to come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Thanks again. Bye for now.